pure data can't give you morals and values.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Right? The thing is, a worldview where hard data guides morals and values is inevitably a nihilistic worldview. Why does one collection of particles matter than the other?
Reductionism is the scientific approach.
It is, but it just gets really strange when you get very reductionist. Like, then things seem very wrong, even though
I agree. So let me rephrase that. So when you start to use the scientific approach too much, things can go wrong. I agree with that. It seems to be that you're falling into something called scientism. Would you agree with that, or do you know what that is? Or
yeah, we talked about that a couple weeks ago. Sure.
the idea that the only way to learn anything about anything in any field is science.
I feel that, yeah, I probably do feel that I associate with that. Yes.
Yeah, and that's a problem, you see, because that's not true. And when you start off with your worldview in such a way is that you limit your frame of reference and your way of trying to look at the world, the sunglasses that you're wearing to see the world, to be that of scientism, then you're going to end up with the wrong conclusions. And this is what I would say is the difference between maybe Professor Huberman and yourself in your conclusions about the existence of a creator or not. You've fallen down on that side of can't be, and he's on the side of there's no issue here. Of course he can be, and so we have these two opposing views from, and I would dare say, relatively scientific background, and I would say that I'm the same. I'm a methodological naturalist in that I believe that when I'm doing science and utilizing science, that my framework is naturalism, but actually I'm not. My worldview is not constrained by that. I'm not a yeah. I'm not a philosophical naturalist because there are other things I know that science is not able to explain that require explanation, and therefore I have to use other tools to get those answers. Be that consciousness, be that value, be that meaning, be that purpose. None of those are scientifically explainable. So do you understand because I'm just trying to I'd like to, rather than just, I don't want it to make it like a you and me and or an us and them type of scenario. I'd like to sort of make some progress. Because particularly when you're raised in the West, and I went through this same thing, I was very science focused. And I still enjoy doing science. And I read. I try and read widely as I can about these things. And then I was very much influenced as this is being the way. Oh, that doesn't sound very plausible. Doesn't sound rational because wouldn't fit into my scientific paradigm. And then it took a while for me to actually learn a little bit more about the foundations of science that then led me out of that sort of rabbit hole. You're aware of the founding principles that are within science? You're aware of those?
Not right now. No, you can summarize those maybe.
I would just give you one sentence. The basic fundamental principle in science is that there are no non-natural explanations.
Sure.
Everything has to be explained naturally. There cannot be any other way of explaining it. And that is
correct.
Absolutely. And that's both a positive, and when you're doing your science, in that it allows you to posit and determine natural causes. But it's a negative in that you're constrained by that worldview. Then there can never be. You are automatically cut off from making any way of inquiry about anything that might be outside of nature. You can't do it
within the scope of science, because science then would be irrelevant because you can't observe it or test it. So it automatically falls out the realm of science. It could be a personal truth.
No, you're misunderstanding me. Because we're talking now about your explanation for everything, not about your personal things at all. Even those things that do you understand?
Okay, no. I don't think I would say that science would be have the ability to explain everything, but I would say science, or just observation, critical.
What could it not explain?
Go ahead.
What could it not explain, Idris?
Anything that can be observed and tested and falsified. So I know there's a limit to like the horizon of what I can know, that I can sort of have confidence that I know that I know. And beyond that horizon, it could be that, metaphysical, I guess that's where metaphysical world is. But I feel like I don't have access to that world because it's easy to just be duped. You don't have any justifiable
I get it.
reasons for.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So the question now is no longer about, because I like this what you've said, because you said you're aware of the limits of the science approach,
Yeah.
which is good, because that is actually going to allow you then to say, okay, for my inquiry into something outside of science or something that science or empirically not amenable, then I need to have a different set of tools, and then you've because why? You don't want to be duped, you don't want to be misled, you don't want to end up thinking or concluding the wrong things. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So when you said right in the beginning that everything I look around and see seems to be more congruent with uh, nature or a natural perspective, as you talked about the Ijaz, then you know that statement therefore is now limited.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that means not everything that you look around and see would be amenable. And I would say there's lots of things I see that are not amenable to nature.
Oh, I'm
And
sorry. So, but the things that I see are nature. So I wouldn't expect to see something that's not part of nature by definition.
consciousness. The brother Ijaz spoke to you about consciousness,
Yeah,
value.
that's a tricky one. I don't know. I don't want to get entangled with that. Like the previous caller,
But you should though.
Yeah,
I,
because
You
it's
know
I would.
why?
yeah,
It's
Okay.
difficult, but we're not here to deal with the easy.
yeah.
We're here to deal with the difficult. And
Yeah.
we could even put consciousness aside, right? We can
Okay.
discuss morals and ethics, right?
Yeah.
That goes a step further. Just keep in mind that just pure data can't give you morals and values. It
I
just
agree.
can't,
I agree with that. Yeah.
right?
Sure.
So the thing is, a worldview where hard data guides morals and values is inevitably a nihilistic worldview because it ends up being about
Um.
numbers.
Sure.
It ends up
If
being
you
about numbers.
yeah, if you get very, break things down, yes, you get to a nihilistic point of view where why is the world
Eventually,
wrong, all that.
you're just categorized as another collection of
Sure.
particles.
Yeah,
And
I agree with that.
why does one collection of particles matter than the other?
Yeah, sure.
And
I
having that
That's a
thought,
very
but that's the
reductionist
thing.
point of view, but
But many people take this point of view today. That's why Yusuf
yeah,
Ponders has written a book on nihilism. Dr. Imran, you
So that
saying you
so the
could
reductionism is the scientific approach.
it is, but it just gets really strange when you get very reductionist. Like then things seem very wrong,
Yeah,
even
I
though
agree. So let me rephrase that. So when you start to use the scientific approach too much, things can go wrong. I agree with that.
no, no,
You end up
that's not
making
what
the
I
wrong.
meant. I'm saying things seem
That's what
very
I'm
wrong,
hearing.
right?
That's what I'm
Like
hearing. So the point, you've heard of Thomas Nagel, Professor Thomas Nagel.
it rings a bell, but remind me.
So he's a Cambridge professor of philosophy, and his focus is actually on the mind. And he wrote a
Okay,
great book that I always reference when I'm talking to people because it's
yeah.
good to read. And it's called Mind and the Cosmos: Why the Material Neo-Darwinist Darwinian Concept of Nature is Almost Certainly False. And this is just sort of a
I
book.
need
So
to read that. Yeah, I haven't
it's
seen it.
really
I
good.
haven't read
Worth
it.
it. So I'm just gonna give you a couple of things. Yeah, just one thing that's really important. He says that my guiding conviction is that the mind is not just an afterthought or an accident or an add-on, but a basic aspect of nature. Science is driven by the assumption that the world is intelligible. Without that, I'm just sort of highlighting a few things within a page, not the whole thing. Without the assumption of an intelligible underlying order which antedates the scientific revolution, those discoveries would not have been made. So the question is, what explains this order? One answer would be that nothing does. Explanation comes to an end in the order itself, which the assumption of intelligibility has merely enabled us to uncover. And then he goes on to say that that's basically saying this is just how things are. And so he concludes, he makes many assumptions. So he's basically saying that we need to be able to explain the intelligibility of the universe, and that we have a mind that allows us to delve into these things. And he says that when it comes to neo-Darwinianism, the account of the origin and evolution of life, he says there are a couple of problems. He says, firstly, given what is known about the chemical basis of biology and genetics, and what is the likelihood of that self-reproducing life forms should have come into existence on the early Earth solely through the operations of laws of physics and chemistry, that's a question that needs to be addressed. The second question is about the sources of variation in the evolutionary process, that set into motion once life began. In the available geological time since the first life forms appeared on Earth, what is the likelihood that as a result of physical accident, a sequence of viable genetic mutations should have occurred that was sufficient to permit natural selection in order to produce the organisms that actually exist? He says the contemporary research in molecular biology reveals that that leaves open the possibility of legitimate doubts about the fully mechanistic account of the origin of evolution of life, depending only upon the laws of chemistry and physics. This can combine with the failure of psychophysical reductionism to suggest that the principles of a different kind were also at work in the history of nature. So he's very anti-reductionist. He says that it's difficult to challenge the modern concepts that we have about in science that we have, particularly when it comes to there being only natural explanations for everything that we see. And he says that sometimes there are things that are not explainable and they're just brushed to a large extent under the carpet. So there's no biological explanation for thoughts and mind and these things.
Yeah. It's a tough
But
one,
actually,
yeah.
that is probably the most fundamental observation that we have.
Absolutely.
And he says that if you're missing a large chunk of the observer, if your theory is not explaining a large chunk of the observed data, then your theory is probably wrong. And so the reason that I'm saying all of this was that it's if you limit yourself to the scientific view, you're going to end up with conclusions that are not viable. And I think that a lot of people, and I was in this same process, when you come out of that, you realize there are other things that other tools that we can use. Then the question then becomes, the question that you asked, how do we then determine that we're heading in the right direction, doing the right things? And there's a few approaches to this. But the first approach, I think your first step would be maybe establishing whether or not God is a reasonable position to say that God exists. Let's not even say that proving, but is it a reasonable position to say that God exists? Once you have that step, then the step comes which specific worldview or about which God concept would be the one that would fit with this deduction or induction that we have used, and then that would be the step forward from there. But I think you're part of it, and this is not, I'm not disparaging. Part of it is that we do carry the remnants of our colonial mindsets, and whenever we see the Western world bring ideas that seem to be a certain way, we swallow them hook, line, and sinker without enough critical analysis of those ideas. And we need to step out from this. In the West, there was a conflict between science and religion. We had the Inquisition. We had Galileo and Copernicus were sort of really controlled by the church and limited in what they could publish. There was a list of books that could not be read and written out. And I think that was it Copernicus or Galileo was under house arrest until he died. And Copernicus released his book about the heliocentric universe. He released it in the year that he died. He had it ready, but he didn't want to release it until he knew that it wouldn't affect him anymore. And it was literally in the year of his death that he was so old he released it then. And that book actually became banned as well. Now, in the East, when it is with Islam, we don't have this history. We don't have this history of conflict between science and religion. They've actually gone hand in hand. In fact, we believe the Quran tells us to go and look at the world around you and the nature that you find, because it will bring you closer to the understanding that there isn't a creator and
I think
order around
definitely
you.
one of the utilities of Islam definitely was pushing people towards discovery and critical thinking and rationality. But I would say for some of the quotes of that book you put in, one Neil Tyson quote I like is that the universe is under no obligation to make sense to you. And while the universe has mysteries, I don't know if we need to look to God immediately instead of dealing with the mysterious.
But Tyson is making a basic error. And the basic error is that the universe is intelligible. So it doesn't matter whether it's not about obligation.
He's saying that it doesn't need to be.
But this is a problem. But this is because the way this is the way I'm saying it's a basic error. I'm not even with all due respect, a very intelligent, obviously individual in his field. He does not know what he's talking about when he says that the universe is under no obligation to be intelligible. The reality is the only way you can do science is if there's uniformity in your experiments and your results. And the problem that we have is that, and the problem that he has, but not that we have, is that the reality is that we see order around us.
Sometimes we don't.
No,
So
even
sometimes
in that,
science is confounding. Sometimes
no.
what we observe
So
is confounding.
let me explain. I understand the fact that we don't understand how some things work is not disorder. So I would go as far as to say there is no such thing as chance or randomness. Yeah, and I can qualify that, but the whole point
I
here
all
is
believe that. We all
yes,
believe that.
sure, we all believe that. And the point here is that what the only way that I'm going to say Tyson Fury, but that's not his name. The only way that the only way that
Neil
this,
Tyson, yeah.
Neil Tyson can make this, Neil Tyson deGrasse can make these sorts of statements is really these are just sort of talking points from atheists. The reality is if you look around and you see we see order we're everywhere within the universe. Otherwise, all I can say, because there are some people who go so far as to say there is the only thing that is in order is what is in your conscious stream of consciousness. So as I turn away from the camera no longer exists. Everything is going, it's turning. It's a waveform that can become anything else. And it could be a pink elephant sitting there now. And when I turn back, I can see the reality again, because I'm imposing upon it something that gives order because I'm observing it. The reality is
But who are we to impose upon the universe our rules?
No, we're not imposing upon the universe our rules.
That it should be intelligible.
No.
Why must it? Why can't some things make sense and other things just don't make any sense? Who are we to demand that things be congruent?
I understand. So no one is making a demand. We are simply uncovering what's already there. And the way we are able to uncover what's already there is because there's an order to be uncovered. If there wasn't an order to be uncovered, if there weren't relationships that we then later define as laws to be uncovered, if they weren't already there in some form or another, then we wouldn't be able to discover them because everything would be different every time.
Absolutely. So we found order. I agree. We found order, but that doesn't necessarily follow that there should be order in every single nook and cranny, and every single phenomenon should make sense. If you look at QM, for example, it was quite confounding for a while, probably even till now.
So again, what I would say again is lack of understanding is not disorder.
No, it doesn't have to be disorder.
Yeah.
But I just think it's difficult to.
No, it doesn't have to be addressed. Lack of understanding is not disorder, irrespective of whether you ever understand it or not.
I don't know.
I think
that's making a positive claim.
It's our ignorance. It's just our ignorance, right?
Yeah, it's better just to be ignorant of what we don't know than to say I know what I don't know.
Let's put it this way, Idris. I have a question to ask you that's been bothering me. You did not come back to make those same points to Dr. Imran or Brother Abbas. You thought about what they had to say and you chose to come back on the program. Am I correct?
Yes.
What was the leading thought in returning here?
I wanted to follow up with some of the points they had last time.
Why?
Because I'm on a journey of self-discovery and discovering learning. I want to learn more about
what have you discovered technically? What have you discovered that led? Because here's the thing: you could have just used Google, you could have watched a YouTube video, but what led you back here to have a conversation with Dr. Imran or Brother Abbas?
Because I respect their opinion.
Right. So what does that tell you? It tells you that they're not interested in the views. They're not interested in hearing their own thoughts. We're interested in real conversations. As you coming back here, we have to ask the question: is there something like motivating you? I want to quote the previous guest: something self-propelling you to come back here. What would that motivation be? You said it's self-discovery. Is there something in particular that you've discovered that you would like to share with us? Something that has been profound in your mind, perhaps? Something that has poked you? What is there that's poking you is what I want to know.
To speak with you all today
There must be something beyond that.
in general.
Yeah, there must
Oh,
be.
I think human beings are naturally curious about our world. We want to understand the world around us,
Okay,
and
so
we
I'm
find that through
curious.
challenging, I'm saying through challenging ideas and discourse,
Beliefs.
we can learn more about our world and the way we
Okay.
think.
So do you think that anything that Dr. Imran has said is irrational? Anything he said up until this point?
I don't think so.
No. Okay. No, he seems like a reasonable person,
He
right?
does. Don't ask him about anything I said, please. Yeah,
Oh no, come on. No.
it might get
I
embarrassing.
haven't heard. I haven't. I don't think I've heard anything really irrational. No.
Just leave it with Imran.
Go ahead.
No, don't say that. The point I'm getting back is that here in Islam, right, we have a motivation, right, which is that Allah calls us to learn more about the world and to learn more about ourselves. But there's a specific point in the Quran where Allah mentions that if we forget Him, we lose ourselves. And so I have to ask, does remembrance of Allah compared to simply adhering to naturalism, is there a difference in the consequences from following one or the other?
Sure.
So when you spoke with Dr. Imran, you said that naturalism can lead to some very specific negative things, right?
I said that naturalism can lead to negative things.
When you get into specificities about
Oh, I say
humans just being,
when you get very
yeah,
reductionistic, then
yes.
certain things seem weird and strange.
But that's a necessary consequence of scientism,
Sure.
isn't it? You said
Yeah,
it's
sure.
curiosity, right? But now let me
Mhm.
replace that with Islam. At what point does it come irrational?
What point? I don't think it's necessarily rational.
But what is the necessary conclusion we come from adhering to the mindset that Islam, provides us with? It gives us a scope of intelligible reasoning to
Sure.
understand the universe, to understand each other. And so if I had to compare one against the other, wouldn't one be obviously more reasonable than the other?
Sure.
Right.
I think you can definitely make that argument. I just
So I
don't
made the argument.
find.
I made the
I just
argument, right? So which one would you say is more reasonable? And be honest. You can disagree. No one's going to bite you here much.
I feel that the naturalistic approach is more reasonable
Okay.
because it
So
does it can
uh-huh.
it acknowledges the limitations of the ability to gain knowledge,
But
and
in
it
Islam, we
does.
do the same. We say that there's naql, that there's ilm al-ghaib, knowledge of the unseen, that the human
Yeah,
experience is only so much, and we need a greater level of, we need someone who has a greater scope of knowledge. And we say that that is Allah. We're not saying God of the gaps here, but let's consider a question now, today, now, with the situation in Palestine. If I take a
uh-oh.
scientism point of view on this, these are just atoms interacting with atoms at the end of the day. There is no inherent value to the life of a child and a bomb dropping on it. Am I correct? No inherent value.
Yeah, things are kind of weird when you scope things
No,
that
no.
way, but yes, from if
It,
you're if
in
you kind
any
of separate
scientific
the
view,
mind from the heart,
but in the
yes,
scientific view, just atoms
you
and
can
molecules, right? It's
sure,
just
but
atoms and
we don't
molecules,
live that way. I live as a human being that has
right? So that you
emotions and
live.
empathy, right?
Yes, great. So we say
Yeah.
then that this is more than just pure scientism, because you don't say that your love is just chemicals, interacting with each other.
Like if I see
There
my
is
daughter, I don't
meaning.
think, oh, the chemicals and endorphins and
Exactly.
oxytocin are doing all these things,
Dosen.
right?
Exactly.
I experience it, right?
Right. So Islam
Sure.
Islam explains that. It says that Allah gave us these things so that we may come to know each other. That makes
Yeah,
sense to me. But
I know, but that's
but
like an
focus with me.
explanation.
I know,
I
but
know the
focus with me.
explanation is congruent, but I don't
Oh,
think that it's necessary to explain the things I don't understand with
but it
like a God.
is. It explains love,
I know,
morality,
I
ethics,
know it
and value.
explains.
It explains there's one thing that science can't explain, and that's human value,
Sure,
right?
absolutely.
right? So
I agree.
but if you live your life as a human and scientism cannot explain human value,
No,
then it
I
wouldn't
don't live
make
my life as
sense.
scientism. I don't.
That's
I
what I'm
don't live my
saying.
life as scientism.
That's what I'm saying. So you
Yeah,
acknowledge
you're right.
that in your lived actions, Idris. You do.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why I'm Muslim, because my lived actions make sense in Islam rather
Yeah.
than outside of Islam.
Yeah.